Please subscribe and support me. I remember the first time I realized I was in trouble. Not the kind of trouble you call a lawyer for, but the kind that crawls under your skin and sits there, buzzing, until it makes you do something you swore you'd never do. It was one of those late summer nights in Willow Creek, when the air felt heavy and sweet, and everything seemed to hum like it was holding a secret. I wasn't supposed to be out. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Tom Miller. And yet, there I was, in the back seat of his old black Chevy, parked behind the diner where I worked the evening shift. Tom had been in my life for years. He was my brother's best friend, the guy who used to carry me on his shoulders when I was too small to keep up with the neighborhood kids. He was also the guy who'd vanished for a few years after high school, gone on to live some bigger, louder life, only to come back last year with that quiet, watchful look in his eyes. That look had changed everything. It wasn't the eyes themselves, still the same hazel, still flecked with gold. It was the way they lingered, the way they seemed to weigh what they saw. That night, I'd just clocked out. The diner's neon sign was buzzing behind me, casting a soft pink glow across the alley. Tom had been leaning against his car, waiting. Need a ride? He'd asked casual, as if we both didn't know I lived 2 blocks away. I should have said no. Instead, I'd smiled like I didn't know better and slid into the back seat, because the front was piled with boxes and tools. It was just the two of us. The smell of leather and motor oil mixed with his cologne, something sharp and clean. The streetlight outside made the inside of the car feel dim and private, like a room with the curtains drawn. He turned slightly, resting one arm on the back of the seat, his fingers drumming close enough that I could feel the air shift. We didn't pull away right away. Instead, we sat there, the hum of the engine low, the air between us thick. He asked how work was, but the question hung there, unimportant. His eyes dropped to my legs, not lingering too long, but enough to make my pulse kick. My skirt had ridden up just a little when I sat down, and I could feel the warmth from his gaze like sunlight through a window. Then the rain started, just a few drops at first, then more, drumming against the roof. He leaned closer, under the pretense of reaching for something on the floor, and his knee brushed mine. Not a big thing. But it felt big. You cold? He asked, his voice low enough that it vibrated in my chest. A little, I admitted, even though I wasn't sure if the shiver running through me had anything to do with temperature. Come here. He patted his thigh, like it was nothing, like I hadn't been imagining that exact move in some far corner of my mind for months. I laughed, a small breathless sound, but I moved. My knees sank into the seat as I shifted onto his lap, careful but not careful enough to avoid the way my hip pressed into his. His hand came to rest at my waist, steadying me, warm through the thin fabric of my dress. The rain outside got heavier, masking the sound of my heartbeat. You fit here too well, he murmured, almost like he didn't mean to say it out loud. His breath brushed my ear, and I had to stop myself from leaning into it. I told myself we were just keeping warm, that the boxes in the front meant there wasn't another option, but the truth was, I liked the way it felt, the way his hand anchored me, the way my knees framed him. We talked about nothing, about how the town had changed, about who'd gotten married and who'd left. But the whole time, our bodies stayed close enough that I could feel the faint rise and fall of his breathing under me. At one point, I reached for his jacket draped across the seat behind him. My movement shifted my weight against him in a way that made him inhale sharply, and my fingers hesitated on the leather. I pretended not to notice, but my skin burned from the contact. When the rain eased up, he still didn't start the car. He just looked at me, his eyes darker now. You know this stays between us, right? He asked. I nodded, and my voice came out quieter than I meant. Our little secret. The next few weeks, we made excuses. Quick errands, short drives, late-night coffee runs that somehow ended with us sitting in the same back seat, finding new ways to blur the lines. Sometimes I'd lean back against him and feel his chin graze my shoulder. Sometimes he'd adjust the rearview mirror, but his hand would linger on my knee afterward, like it had nowhere else to be. Once, after a bonfire at the lake, we sat there still smelling faintly of smoke and summer air. My dress was damp at the hem from the grass, and he reached down, brushing it lightly before tugging the fabric just enough to free it from where it clung to my thigh. It was innocent in motion, but the look in his eyes made it anything but. Another time, he pulled into a drive-in theater long after the last showing, just so we could sit in the lot with the screen blank and the world quiet. I curled sideways across his lap, my back against the door, my head resting against his shoulder while his hand traced idle circles on my hip. He told me stories about the cities he'd lived in, the nights that had felt too big for him to sleep. I told him things I'd never said out loud before. We didn't kiss. Not yet. Somehow that made it worse. But the night everything shifted was late September. The air had turned cooler, and I'd just gotten off a closing shift. He was waiting again, this time in the shadows of the lot. We didn't say much as I climbed into the back. The streetlights had gone dim, and the only sound was the creak of the seat as I slid across it. He reached for me without thinking, pulling me onto his lap like we'd done it 100 times before. Only this time, I didn't keep my hands to myself. I rested one against the side of his neck, feeling the faint thud of his pulse. His eyes closed for a second, and when they opened again, there was nothing casual in them. The air between us was charged, the kind of charge that makes you forget where you are. I leaned in, close enough to feel the heat off his skin, to smell the faint scent of coffee on his breath. I didn't kiss him. I let the moment stretch until it almost hurt. His fingers flexed at my waist, like he was fighting the urge to close the distance. And that's how it went. A slow, impossible dance that lived in glances, in the press of my knee against his, in the way his thumb would trace the inside of my wrist when no one was looking. We became experts at hiding in plain sight, speaking in code, finding moments where no one else would think to look. Some nights, he'd pull into the empty school parking lot, and we'd sit in the dark, the radio low, my legs draped across his. Other nights, we'd end up in the back seat after a party, the sound of laughter muffled by closed doors while I sat perched on his lap, pretending to be scrolling through my phone while his hand rested at the small of my back. It wasn't about what we did. It was about what we didn't. The restraint made it electric. The secrecy made it dangerous. And every time I told myself it was the last time, I knew I was lying. Our little secret started in the back seat, but it didn't stay there. It followed us into every glance, every touch that lingered too long. And I think, deep down we both knew, some secrets aren't meant to be kept forever.